stuff. So the reason I decided to come was I've been in this restaurant for like 20 years, and it's always had a soft spot in my heart. And it's funny, I think my life changed in this room, and I can explain that because this table was there, and Daniel Day-Lewis was sitting where you are, and Adrian Dunbar was here, and Shaw was there, Fiona, and Daniel was, you know, he'd been doing the part, and you know, sometimes you're thinking like, you know, he's an actor, and you kind of forget, like, and then he did the scene where she tells him she gets married. So I was like, go ahead, Daniel. And there was a very sweet girl from Wicklow who was sitting opposite him, and Daniel didn't really want to rehearse, but I knew how crazy he was, and it said he banged his head off the table. So there was a glass just right in front of his head, and he was so fucking nuts that I was afraid he would actually put his head through the glass. So I said to this girl, would you ever, when he says that line, I said, it's not in the script, but just take the glass from him and say, you have enough drink. So that's what happened, and then he just slammed his head on the table, and many times. And, huh?
He just lost his reputation?
Yeah, he just lost the head. And then I was like blown away by his performance, and then I had to get Fiona, and she was trying to, you know, act up a storm, and I was like, Fiona, like, you can't compete. It's like, you know, not that she couldn't compete as an actress, because she's probably one of the greatest. But I remember, and the whole story, I thought I knew what it was about. It was about my brother Peter and me, and my dad Peter and me, and a conflict. But when I thought it was my brother, but when I finished the scene, I realized it was my dad, because I put my hand up to Fiona Shaw's face and just put my hand very gently on her face and said, you're okay. And I heard sobbing behind me. And I was like, who the fuck is crying? And I turned around, and Daniel Day was crying there like a baby. And I went over to him, and I just tried to get him out of the room. Where that car is there was the trailer. So I dragged him to the trailer, but he wouldn't walk, so I had to literally lift him into the trailer, which wasn't easy. And then I pushed him down on the little, you know, cushion thing, and I said, what the fuck was that about? And he said, you teach me how to make a bomb, and I'll drop it on you. And you know, in that movie, he's the painter. He painted with his foot. And the first day I saw him rehearsing, he was rehearsing to paint with his foot for like the morning. So I said, oh great, I go to lunch. And I went to lunch and I left him at it, and I came back. And at 5:30 he was still painting with his foot. So I went home and I got a brush and started painting with my foot. And after 20 minutes I had a cramp. And I said, if this guy's crazy enough to be an artist like that. And I always admired artists, and we played up Christie's artistry more than anything else in the movie. So when people ask me to speak at an exhibition, I think, like, what can I say, you know? Sometimes it's like art is the opposite of verbalization. You know, it's like you paint to stop talking, you paint to stop thinking. So then to come back and apply thinking to the painting seems very odd, you know? And, you know, I know from my own experience growing up that this couldn't exist, like, back then, you know? Like, my dad was... The first images I ever saw was after my dad put a TV aerial up on the roof. And he was trying to get the BBC, and he kept trying to turn it east. You know, where's east? And his attitude to east was like, see the fucking river there? Like, he'd be pointing to the iffy. He says, that's east, where it goes out to England, where the fucking boat goes, that's east. And I was a terrible little kid, and I said, no, Dad, the Liffey goes in a circle from, you know, Kildare or somewhere to Dublin like that. And he's like, okay. And he kept finding, and it was just snow. All there was snow on the television. And then he kept saying, let's try Southeast, Harlech, Davis signal. So after, and this is Ireland back in the day, I was an altar boy, so our television reception was terrible. Because east was where the church was. And the signal was literally hitting the church and bouncing off the houses opposite and reforming up the road. So I always felt visually we were in the shadow of the church. Do you know what I mean? So our great artists were the stained glass guys and whoever got work from the church, and you know, and then you had the ones who were in opposition, the few prods that painted who were, you know, in opposition to the church. And so you had a country that, like, my metaphor for it was coming home from the church after doing benediction, and it was totally foggy. And for the first time I remember looking in the window and the TV was perfect. The picture was perfect. There was no fog, no snow. And the reason for that was that the fog bends the signal. So even as a kid I thought, you know, that's Ireland. When it's foggy outside you can see in reality. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like for me that we lived in a fog. I lived in a fog visually. I never remember in school being taught anything about painting, anything. So whenever I come across artists, I'm like overawed by them and trying to think like, I couldn't do that, I couldn't think that way. Even though I know I'm a filmmaker, I think I'm kind of more in the emotional world. So this seems to me like a very, like Mary stuff, I don't know, it just seems to me very strong, very primitive, you know, just gestures and inspiration. And Colin, like I know he's explained it to me and it makes sense. It's beautiful, very clear, classic cutouts, you know, like, but I actually think the work is beautiful and complements it. And then the O'Donovan woman from Cork who's doing these weird forms that are very interesting. And then taking that and putting it on the 2-dimension. It's kind of like, I suppose like movies are like sculpting in time, aren't they? They're just, so I'm really, Locks has always been a great restaurant. It's good to see. The only other exhibition I think I've ever opened in Ireland was not long ago in the Dean Hotel. But I'll always want to go where people who are in the real world, in the business world, are helping artists. And the McKillans are great and the people here are great. I'm honoured to be here, Colin, thank you very much. There's an architectural clarity to all the work I see here. And buy a few, that's all I can say. And thank you.
Thank you.